This edition of Mac Voices is sponsored by Smile, the makers of PDF Pen, PDF Pen Pro, PDF Pen for iPhone, PDF Pen for iPad, PDF Pen Scan Plus for iPhone and iPad, Text Expander Touch, and Disk Label. Find out more about all their great products at smilesoftware.com. Welcome to Mac Notables on Mac Voices. This is the Talk of the Mac community. I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, this time a very special guest, Mr. Benjamin Franklin. Excuse me, Bryan Chaffin.
I have a bit of an experiment going, so please come back later.
It's great to see you, Bryan.
Indeed, it's good to see you too.
Yes, and we have new background even. So cool. Congratulations on moving.
Yeah, I had to move. I was supposed to be on the show, a week ago?
Yeah, I think.
I was still moving.
Yeah.
Yeah, we scheduled it, I think, anyway, yeah, it's good to be moved. It's good to be here, and thanks for having me on.
Hey, no, it's a pleasure. Thank you for making the time, because I know usually for about 6 months post-move, you just never feel completely settled, or you never can find everything you want.
I've been able to extend that out to years sometimes.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so,
good.
I'm a pro at this, I guess.
Quite an accomplishment.
That's good, yeah.
Bryan, there's so many things that we could talk about. One thing, though, that seems to always kind of bubble to the top when you're on is, and we haven't heard about it for a while, and I wanted to ask you about it, Bitcoin.
Okay, sure.
Is Bitcoin still a thing? I just saw something go by Twitter that a company in San Francisco that produced some of the mining hardware has gone out of business.
A lot of mining companies have gone out. A lot of mining hardware companies have gone out of business, come into and gone out of business. There's been several mining companies that were either run incompetently or were intended as crook operations from the very beginning. I mean, Bitcoin is an unregulated concept, let alone even being a regulated market. And there are a lot of players that are going to come into any unregulated market, especially a brand new market, who are going to come into and go out of business frequently. I started Bitcoin mining like maybe a year ago, and the entire mining thing is just completely different today. Mining was dominated by individuals a year ago. And right now it's dominated by large companies, many of whom are the same hardware companies that used to make their money by selling to people like me.
So what does this mean for the I'll call it the Bitcoin economy, for lack of a better term? Does it still exist? Is it now falling under the control of more established organizations, or is this becoming a parallel thing to established banking organizations?
Gal, I don't know. It's probably none of those things. Bitcoin is so Bitcoin is not coming under the power or control of established large companies. New companies have emerged that have grown large within the Bitcoin community, but they're still probably relatively tiny in the scope of what we consider to be large companies. The banking is still keeping Bitcoin at arm's length. There haven't been any major regulatory revelations, changes, hurdles, freedoms, regulatory ease. There haven't been any major regulatory changes in several months. You just simply the biggest thing that's changed is that the Bitcoin value is right now at about $368. I think the last time I was on the show was probably at $600. In January, it was at $1,000, and then a year ago it was at something like $100. So we're well up year over year. We're well down on the year, and it's just because it's a relatively small market. Small amounts of money can move things. There are more and more and more retailers that are taking Bitcoin, whether or not that's actually equaling huge transactions. I kind of doubt it, in part because with the value of Bitcoin where it is, there are a lot of people who have Bitcoin might be unwilling to spend it because they are anticipating or wanting the value to go back up. So I don't know. It's all very fluid. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think it may be a little more fluid than most currencies, but that's still the nature of currencies. I
Well,
guess,
it's because it's a fraction of the size of most currencies.
and I guess the reason I wanted to bring it up is that for a while it seemed like that was a hot thing. You know, we're taking Bitcoin. We're certain retail outlets, usually in Silicon Valley, West Coast, San Francisco kind of area, were taking Bitcoins. A lot of online services were taking Bitcoins. And then, like everything, it sort of fades from the news. And so I wondered if that meant that it faded completely out of the picture, or if it's
No.
just sort of found its niche and it's
There's
kind of
still
hanging in there.
lots of money involved in investing in Bitcoin technologies. There are more services that are coming online. Like I said, there are more retailers that are coming online. As I quickly search here, I remember Overstock. Since our last interview, Chuck, Overstock made an announcement on how much business in Bitcoin sales it had done. $1.6 million in Bitcoin transactions and that was in May. So what, 6 months ago? $15,000 in August. Overstock was averaging $15,000 worth of Bitcoin transactions per day. I mean, that's actually pretty cool. And there are, like I said, additional retailers that have come on board to accept it. And part of that has been made possible by online exchanges that make it possible for a retailer to accept Bitcoin but get paid instantaneously in dollars, so that there's no risk to them. There's no risk and no benefit of fluctuating values in Bitcoins. Businesses, especially retailing, which tends to be a very low margin business, can't afford a lot of risks. So what happens is someone goes and pays in Bitcoins, and because they're working with a particular exchange, that money instantaneously those Bitcoins get instantaneously sold behind the scenes, and the merchant gets paid in dollars right then and there. And so that just kind of removes all risk from them. And the interesting thing about that, though, is that what it means is that these Bitcoins are being constantly fed back into the sales side of the market, right? Rather than being accumulated or even spent in and of themselves. So it actually has kind of a deflationary impact on it. But it is likely necessary for Bitcoin to become more mainstream for that to happen.
Okay, so Bitcoin is alive and well. Is the primary appeal of Bitcoin still the anonymity aspect of it?
Yeah, it depends on who it is. I think that the ease with which one can do a transaction, and the fact that transaction can't be reversed, that's still appealing. There's certainly still a libertarian wing of the Bitcoin community that is just all about, keep the government off my hands off my money, and no one's ever going to know what I'm doing. That's certainly still there, but I don't think that is the primary. I don't think that's the primary lure outside of that wing. And it's certainly, I think, not the primary lure for the hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars that are being invested by venture capitalist firms into Bitcoin technologies.
So are you still mining?
I am not mining right now. I would like to be actually, I'm doing some cloud mining. I'm toying with cloud mining. That's where you're paying someone else to mine hardware that's on their end, where they're taking care of it, and then they're charging you a maintenance fee. And I don't really. I actually suspect that it's a losing proposition. I will know in probably 6 months, so I'll check back with me then. But the real issue for me is that the value of Bitcoins right now is low enough and the price of electricity, especially in California, is high enough that I cannot profitably mine without investing a crap ton of money. This is actually a big reason why mining has become dominated by these large firms, cloud operations that I also just mentioned. Right? It's all kind of tied in together.
What, cheap electricity, you mean, or?
Yeah, cheap electricity has a lot to do with it, but also simply the rate at which the network has grown. I mean, frankly, I'm sure I wasn't alone, but I predicted this about a year ago that within a couple of years, the mining would in fact be dominated by companies. I think within 20, 30, 40 years, mining will actually be dominated by banks. I think the banks will eventually have to get into the game, and that mining will be used primarily to maintain the integrity of the network, which is what it was designed to do in the first place. And but the issue on electricity is that there are markets around the world. There are even markets within the United States where electricity is a lot cheaper than in other parts, especially, say, Silicon Valley. And it is easier for the companies who have a few resources to set up shop in one of these markets, get some warehouse space, air condition it, and fill it with mining equipment and go. They can do that and make a profit at it a lot easier than someone like me can do it mining in, the garage or a spare bedroom or the basement or anything else. And we've just seen a massive shift away from the individual miners towards the mining operations controlling things. And
I guess I would agree with you. Some of that just seems inevitable. I mean, it almost smacks of the gold rush. You get Scotty the miner that's out there, with one mule. But if you can get somebody that's actually, has the equipment and to process it, it just makes sense. So I don't know. It's always interesting to me that you see these things come and go, and you can't decide whether they really did come and go or whether they were just burning bright in the press at the time and then, faded away a little.
Well, keep in mind that when Bitcoin became a thing earlier this year, late last year, it was after years of mostly burning in the background and mostly being a hangout for miners and people who were buying drugs and guns and things on the Silk Road. And in that time, there has been a lot of mainstream light brought to bear on Bitcoins for a long time. And it did spike there was a huge spike in interest, but I don't think that spike represents you're always going to have some kind of spike. I think we just happen to see a spike rather than that spike representing some kind of peak of interest over the long term. Yeah.
And I think because it's currency, it's, a medium of exchange, I think that causes a lot more interest in it, and maybe even a certain amount of anxiety for the people that don't understand it. Are their dollars going to be worth as much? Is gold going to be worth as much? Now we suddenly have a cryptocurrency that, the geeks understand, but the rest of the world really didn't have a good firm handle on.
Yeah, that's true.
So a bit of anxiety.
And don't forget the vested interest in the, quite frankly, immensely large corporate interests who have everything invested in the status quo.
Yes.
They don't want to see things change. But then like I said, I've mentioned several times now, there's a lot of money coming in from VCs right now into Bitcoin technologies. A lot of stuff that's going on behind the scenes, a lot of stuff that's being developed relatively quietly. And, what comes out of that, I don't know, but there's a lot of smart money that's being pointed at Bitcoin right now.
Well, maybe we can throw a little light on it.
Maybe. No, right now, no, I don't have any light yet.
Okay.
If that's what.
Oh no, I didn't expect you to have anything right now, but just in general.
I've been holding out on you.
Yeah, I knew it. This edition of Mac Voices is sponsored by Smile, the makers of the newest version of Text Expander for iPhone and iPad. Folks, I used to use Text Expander Touch with a number of applications on iOS 7 that had been specifically enhanced with Text Expander functionality, and it was quite useful. All of the snippets I'd created for my desktop were right there waiting for me. And then something changed. iOS 8 was released, bringing custom keyboards to the iPhone and iPad. And then came Text Expander 3 and its custom keyboard. And suddenly, everything changed. Text Expander worked just like it did on my Mac, and just like it should. Anywhere a keyboard was available, the Text Expander 3 keyboard was available, and with it, snippets everywhere. Not just in specifically designated apps, but everywhere. Mail, messages, calendars, social media clients, everywhere. What I discovered was a whole new set of snippets that I needed to create because I use my iPhone and iPad in different ways. And there were lots of snippets that weren't useful on my Mac, but were massively useful in iOS. I can now construct text messages in a few seconds that would have normally taken a lot more seconds, maybe even minutes. And I can be clear on exactly what I want to say instead of having to revert to internet abbreviations or my own secret code that no one else understands. Emails can be answered in a much more complete fashion, and whatever signature I want to use is only a short snippet away. And that's just the beginning. Frequently accessed website URLs, date abbreviations, timestamps. The usefulness of Text Expander is limited only by your imagination and the recognition of things that you type over and over again. Getting Text Expander 3 for your iOS device opens up a whole new world of time saving. Get Text Expander 3 in the iOS App Store or visit smilesoftware.com to find out more about what it can do for you. And of course, don't forget Text Expander for your Mac, too. They both share the same snippet library, synced through Dropbox, so that what you create on your Mac is available in iOS, and what you create in iOS can be used on your Mac. Text Expander from Smile, my most used productivity utility. I love it, and you will too. Thanks to Smile for their support of MacVoices. So, Bryan, every other time that you're here too, we have to check in on the novel, and I'll use that as a springboard to where we're going. But I know that, judging by your Twitter stream and your blog, that it's still progressing. It's definitely on its way. So, how far on its way is it?
It is on its way. Now, I am working on my synopsis right now, so I'm trying to sell my book. My book is done. I'm trying to sell it, trying to get an agent, literary agent, that is. And the literary agent will theoretically sell the manuscript to a publisher who will then put me through fresh rounds of hell in terms of editing and changes and whatnot. The process of getting an agent is hard. I think we've talked a little bit about that before. I think I talked about the query letter and how difficult it is to write a query letter. Did we do that?
I'm not sure exactly the query letter. I know we've talked about how tough it is to get an agent.
So writing a query letter, I spent weeks writing my query letter. And keep in mind, my query letter is 268 words long. It's not long. And it's hard. It's hard to do it well, I should say, because you've got to be able to entice the agent without invoking questions that the agent uses to say no to, right? So, I mean, you've got to make your hook interesting. You've got to make the story seem tangible, and you've got to do it without naming all your characters and without giving any backstory or any background information. And it's hard. It's hard to do it well. It's really hard to do it well. And as more and more, I doubt there's ever been any time in history where anywhere near as many people are writing novels as they are today, right now. And not just because we're in the middle of NaNoWriMo, which is the National Novel Writing Month. Not just because of that. Lots and lots and lots of people are trying to write novels these days. And that makes the competition all that much harder. But so I did finally get a query letter that I like, and I started querying. But I almost immediately ran into agents who want a synopsis along with the query letter. And synopsi are also very, very difficult. You've got to tell the story in complete and total fashion, again, without naming too many characters, without delving into any side stories and any subplots. And, for what I'm struggling with is that my subplots all inform my major plot. So it's very difficult.
Well, obviously we wish you the best of luck with it.
Thank you, sir.
So if for all you literary agents out there, you need to talk to Bryan, please. Yeah. So now let's take that and let's run with it.
All right.
You're an author. All right. You are
technically an aspiring author.
Well, okay. Well, it's written, so I guess. Well, never mind.
It's written.
So I guess the point is, you do that. You are at the Mac Observer. You contribute regularly to the Mac Observer's Daily Observations podcast. You have the Apple Context Machine with Jeff Gammon. So
Daily podcast.
You're a busy guy.
Weekly.
Weekly. Yeah. You're a busy guy, And
I am.
I wanted to ask you, because I don't think we've ever done it before, to just give us a quick rundown of your essential apps on whatever device that you use, whether it's the Mac, the iPhone, iPad, whatever. Where do you spend most of your time doing what with what?
Wow, I spend most of my time on my Mac, on my desktop Mac, which is a 2008 Mac Pro. I'd like to update that for what that's worth, but that's not in the cards right now. So almost all of my day job, which is the Mac Observer, is done at my desk with my Mac Pro. If I'm writing away from my desk in the house, it's with the MacBook Air. And I do a lot of writing in coffee shops for my novel, and a lot of editing and stuff like that. All that stuff I do on my MacBook Air as well. For my day job, I actually use Dreamweaver, believe it or not, because it I'm not or ever be angry at Adobe for wrecking Go Live. Go Live was an amazing piece of software, and Adobe bought it and just chipped away at it forever, and then eventually killed it. And we've got Dreamweaver, which was purchased from Macromedia.
Macromedia.
Yeah, right. And it has a couple of features. Anyway, whatever. Dreamweaver is not my dream app, but it does produce clean code, and especially for what I need to do, because I prefer to write in a WYSIWYG environment. I am very capable of hand coding all my HTML, but I prefer to write in a WYSIWYG environment. My point being that Dreamweaver produces clean code. It allows me to write stories relatively easy and fast, and it gives me quick access to my assets. So I spend a lot of time in Dreamweaver. I also spend a lot of time in Photoshop. We do a lot of images at the Mac Observer. We do a lot of doctored images at the Mac Observer. A lot of what I frankly think are very funny images at the Mac Observer, and almost all of that work is done in Photoshop. Jeff Gamet obviously does a lot of our images too. I know that he's writing in, what's he writing in? I don't know what he's writing in, but I know that he uses Photoshop a lot too. He's certainly not using Dreamweaver, and very few people hate themselves quite as much as I do, I guess. And I also use Safari, and that's where our content management system is. I'm looking at my doc right now. I spend a lot of time in Twitter, obviously. I spend a lot of time in Apple's Mail, obviously. Obviously in iTunes as well, and I'm going to stop saying obviously at any point now. I do my podcasts with Logic. If I'm recording and editing, I use Logic because I use Logic for music as well. I'm very familiar with it and comfortable with it. And that's where most of my day job stuff is done.
Okay.
With my novel was written using Scrivener, which I think is one of the finest pieces of software ever produced for the Mac. It's a wonderful piece of software.
We seem to hear that a lot from people that write for a living or an avocation. Yeah, Scrivener is just fantastic.
Scrivener is wonderful for a lot of different writing applications, not just doing novels. It's got an outline feature that I think is solid. It's got this ability to look at your work as if they were index cards that you can then like shift around and actually move text around. For me, I personally love the way I've got a friend who's a writer, and he has actually written more than one novel in Word. So it's one long document, which is what a lot of people have done for a long time. Ever since we started writing on computers, that's actually the way it was done, until products like Scrivener, and to a lesser extent, Mariner's Story Mill, which I think Scrivener is much better than, but whatever. Those kinds of applications change things by allowing writers to start like dividing up their work in chapters and scenes and parts, and like managing all your footnotes and doing stuff like from within Scrivener, I can compile my novel as an EPUB, I should say, as a Kindle document, as a Kindle book, as a PDF, as a Word document, as a RTF, as a plain text document, whatever I want to do, I can do it from within Scrivener when I go to compile. And it's amazing. And I probably use 20% of what it can do. And the really beautiful thing about it is that the other 80% never gets in my way. That's a hard thing to do. Something like Word, my personal assumption is that few people will use more than 5 to 10% of what Word can do. But it always kind of feels like the rest of Word is getting in your way, despite the fact that I think that the Office for the Mac in particular is a pretty good piece of software. It's still, I don't know, Scrivener's just awesome.
Yeah, we won't go down the Microsoft path. Dreamweaver, I'm curious, are you, because I believe that that's on Creative Cloud now. Are you using the current version, or are you using a better version?
I'm a couple of versions back, actually, simply because it's what I have. I think I'm on version 5.5. And I believe that's 2 versions back from Creative Cloud. Yeah. And in particular, Dreamweaver 5.5 is what I'm using.
Yeah. And listen, I'm right there with you on Go Live, because I've been, up until Yosemite, I've been able to keep Go Live running, and now it just is not without installing some unsecure versions of Java. I had to give up Go Live several years ago. I'm in awe of you, sir. How did you? Well, frankly, not using it as much with as many of its features. But just like you, it was very comfortable. The features I did need, it was still doing. So now I'm in the market for a good WYSIWYG editor that, I don't necessarily need a whole lot of site management features, but I do love the WYSIWYG, and I need something that handles tables really well. So if you have a suggestion, Brian, if you have a suggestion, I'm more than willing to listen.
So really, Chuck, I think that my advice to you would be to learn CSS and do tables like God meant them to be done, and do everything that you would do with tables with CSS. But keep in mind, the guy who's giving you that advice still uses tables, because I'm comfortable with them.
Yeah, good point. It's still surprising to me that something as basic as a decent table seems to be so potentially involved in creating on a website. So. That's a whole other story.
I was always very comfortable coding tables by hand, and I'm very comfortable manipulating them with the Dreamweaver. Go Live, of course, was a great way to do tables. But you really can do everything that you would want to do with a table. You can do with CSS. That's the thing. You just have to learn it, and there's a bit of a learning curve there. But if you can get past that learning curve, you will be. Because at some point tables are probably no longer going to be even part of the standard. That's my assumption. Yeah. And I think that's unfortunate, because I think there's just a lot of things that make sense in tables, but that's but you can do all that with CSS. Yeah, you can. But the little bit that I need it for a couple of very specific things, and so I don't want to go through the learning curve if I don't have to. Fair enough. So it's just the way it is. I'm not really surprised to hear you say Scrivener. I guess I am, as we said, I'm a little surprised to hear you say Dreamweaver. Photoshop, not a bit. So I guess a lot of us just figure that you have access to all kinds of software, all kinds of hardware, all kinds of productivity enhancing things, and to hear you kind of fall back on some of the workhorses and not necessarily even the current version of workhorses is maybe a little surprising to some of us. Well, I would. All right, so I'm resistant to Creative Cloud. I'm resistant to the idea of renting my software. That makes me tense. It just from a sheer principle and philosophy standpoint, I don't want to rent my software. Adobe, of course, and Microsoft before it, their dream is for us to rent our software. So I didn't need in that what I do with Dreamweaver is so basic, because I'm writing text, I'm placing images, and I'm positioning stuff. I'm doing very little formatting. Dreamweaver is great for that, again, because it does produce perfectly clean code. And when you're using an online CMS, a content management system, which is what we use for the Mac Observer, we need to make sure that our any future changes we make to our layout can be handled, can be applied retroactively. So having absolutely clean, pure HTML is vital to that. And that is one thing that, to Adobe's credit, Dreamweaver does well. The reason is I would love to ditch it, but every time I've gone looking for another WYSIWYG HTML tool, it either doesn't give me good enough asset management, or it doesn't produce clean code, or I can't access the code. I can't edit. I can't actually do hand edits with the code, which I do need to do sometimes. And everything always falls just a little bit short, and that's probably because my needs are fairly esoteric.
I don't know. I mean, I don't have those exact same needs, but the needs don't sound that esoteric. You need asset management. You need to be able to position things properly. That sounds like a lot of, well, see, we live in a world where websites are constructed a lot differently than the days when Dreamweaver started and when GoLive started. So, but and maybe we're both just dinosaurs and we're trying to keep on doing it the old way as opposed to
I was about to say, please note that we're both old.
Yeah. Well, one of us is.
Well, we'll leave it to the watchers.
Yeah, exactly.
To the viewers, the viewer to decide who.
Exactly, Mr. Franklin. Yes. So how about on iPad and iPhone? Because I can't believe that you don't have anything there that assists you in what you do.
If I did more stuff, so I do use my iPad to take notes. If I'm going to go on an interview, I'm either going to be using a notebook or I'm going to be using my iPad to take notes. I certainly take a lot of photographs with my iPhone. And if I'm going to a trade show and I'm taking products at booth, I'm using my iPhone. If I'm doing an interview with somebody and I need to get a headshot from them, I'm going to use my iPhone to do that sort of thing. The reality is, though, that the way my work goes, I usually have access to my Mac. And since so much of work involves typing, I'm actually iPad. I know a lot of people who are not, but I am comfortable typing on an iPad. I can touch type with on an iPad, but I have my computer just right here. So my iPad definitely tends to be a consumption device. I read almost all of my books on my iPad. I play several games on my iPad. I check the weather obsessively on my iPad. And it's not because the tools aren't there, and it's not because I'm resistant to the idea. It's just because I really haven't needed to.
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, and I think I'm impressed by, I guess, just what you said. You don't have to be out and moving a lot. Trade shows, those kind of events, sure. But for the most part, you're sitting there getting the information fed to you over the web or by email or whatever, and doing the research and then writing it up. So it does stand to reason that would make sense, that you would use more of your desktop.
Yeah, if I'm wanting to do some research away from my desk, I'm probably going to do that on my iPad before I will do that on my MacBook Air. Just because, the iPad is such a great consumption device. It can be a capable production device as well, but it's a wonderful, amazing consumption device. I don't need to process images on it, so I don't, but I could. I don't need to record on it, but well, you know what? If I was doing an interview, I'd probably be recording on my iPhone. To do an interview and then to do a transcript later. I tend to do things like that with my iPhone. But I will tell you, the last 2 years at least, maybe the last 3 years, at CES and Macworld, before Macworld's demise, Macworld iWorld, I did not carry my computer to the show floor. I carried my iPad to the show floor. I took my notes with my iPad, and I took photographs with my iPhone, and then did work back at the hotel on my computer.
Makes sense. iPhone. I've wanted to ask you this earlier. What iPhone are you running now? Have you upgraded to a 6 of any flavor?
I did get a 6.
Okay.
I wasn't desperate to get a 6. I was very happy with my iPhone 5S, But with Apple introducing Apple Pay, and with the shift to a large, with the long-awaited shift to a large screen device, I absolutely needed to be able to speak about it from firsthand experience. So I used AT&T's Next Plan, which is modeled after T-Mobile's system that essentially allows you to upgrade once a year.
There's always those one or two features that they do a great job of it. That's you say, okay, I need to go there, and especially in the job that you do.
Yeah,
no question about it. But for most of us, I think there's that you're going to do the cost benefit analysis, but there's always something that's like, okay, that would be really nice to have, or it solves a problem for me, or it's just so cool I can't stand it.
Yeah,
one of the three.
That was Touch ID for me. I really, really wanted to test out Touch ID and Siri before that. This year, though, it was the Apple Pay, and it was just the experience of using that large screen that I needed to be able to talk about it. I didn't lust after it. I needed to be able to talk about it.
Well, let's talk about Apple Pay for a second. Has it been everything you think it should be or can be?
I've set up Apple Pay. I've yet to do a transaction.
Because you don't go out of the house, or because you haven't found someone that takes it?
I plead the fifth. No, I think it's mainly because the places I've gone haven't been taking it. I haven't done any major retailer purchases. None of the restaurants or coffee shops that I go to accepts Apple Pay yet, and I haven't specifically sought it out. So. That I didn't go to Walgreens just to buy something to do Apple Pay, but I tell you, with the Rite Aid CVS stuff, I've got a CVS that's just a couple blocks away from me in my new house. I will be finding Walgreens.
Really, you feel that strongly about it?
I do. Come on, man. I get very tense about a lot of principled actions that most people don't really care about. But I just think that the Rite /CVS /NCX /Walmart were just being so ridiculous about Apple Pay and about the fact that the systems at CVS and Rite Aid would incidentally accept Apple Pay payments. They're just being so ridiculous about it. I don't want to. I have no interest in supporting them. You know what? It's funny. I tweeted yesterday. I retweeted a quote from someone. That's every time we spend our money, we're voting for the kind of world we want to live in. And that's a very, very true statement. It's it's an extraordinarily true statement. And it's something that I think that we forget. We forget that despite the fact that our economy is controlled by very large corporations, our money still counts, especially when it's added up cumulatively.
And I agree with that. And I know that I've expressed that opinion at times in person to people, and they say, "Well, you're just an Apple fanboy, that you just want to support Apple and you don't want to support anything else." And it's like, well, no, I really want to support the safety and security and the lack of data mining. Or maybe that's not exactly true, because my data still is being mined because it's going to a credit card company. And I'm not sure there's a way to avoid that. But the idea that you have a secure system in place, ready to go right now, and they are making me use, at least in theory, a less secure system, yeah, I've got a little problem with that. And I think that's a very eloquent way to say it. You vote with your wallet, no question, no matter what products you choose and pick. And in this case, which retailers you decide to frequent.
Yeah, if you go shop at Walmart, you are directly participating in, at this point, the result of decades of outsourcing, but also the deliberate and artificial destruction of the merchant class in the United States of America. I mean, I don't shop at Walmart. I will not shop at Walmart because I'm going to vote with my dollars.
Right.
And that's just a tiny example. I try not to use. I readily use Google search. And I readily use YouTube. By the way, did you see my tweet a few weeks ago? I asked how many people would pay, say, $100 to use YouTube without commercials, without ads.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, I wish Google would give me the option of paying them direct money to opt out of tracking and to opt out of ads. I mean, like I was watching a video on YouTube and it wasn't that long, and there were three, four, five ads that popped up getting in the way each time. It's just a nuisance. Let me pay for my stuff. I'm sick of the advertising world. Okay, I say that. The Mac Observer is predicated on advertising, but I don't think that our advertising gets in the way of stuff. Advertising is a valuable thing, but I am very sick of all of our services shifting to this advertising pay model. So let me pay for some stuff. And Apple lets me pay for stuff. Apple lets me pay for my hardware. It's one reason why I like Apple. Yeah. But I would pay Google. I'd probably pay Google $200 a year to use all of their services, ad free and to be. Oops, sorry about that. Ad free and to be not tracked. I would do that.
I'm waiting for somebody to offer me to come in and track me and watch everything. You know, on a more, I mean, hey, you come in, you can see how many strokes of the razor I use every morning, you know, if you'll pay me enough money. Why didn't we just cut out the middleman and let me go right to the people that want to know? I realize I'm being a bit facetious, but, you know, after a while, it becomes really intrusive. I don't mind what pops up on the sidebars because I've got ads on MacVoices too. So I don't mind that as much, and they're tracking you all around the web. Okay, that's just the status quo at the moment. But the pop-ups, the pop-overs, the pop-unders, and all that, the ads that are incessantly in front of videos that you're trying to watch, I can't believe that they actually think that sells anything to anyone. That's the really interesting thing to me about it, that when it's that intrusive and not informative, but intrusive, if anything, I think it's having a negative effect.
Well, you know, one of the things, I should think so too, actually. I should think so too. One of the things that we've been doing well at with our podcast at the Mac Observer, I'm talking about TMO's Daily Observations, the Apple Context Machine, and the Mac Geek Gab, is doing a lot of, we personally tell our listeners about our sponsors. And with Backbeat Media, they're helping us get quality companies that are sponsoring things. I find that useful. Not only that, our listeners find it useful. But having ads that pop up in front of a video, that's not useful. I'm at the point with YouTube where I'm waiting for a message saying this commercial brought to you by so-and-so. And to, you know, have the ad that is paying for the ad or something. Google and Facebook are taking us to a world that I don't particularly want to be a player in. You know, I don't care for it. And I'm glad that Apple is there demonstrating to the world that you can actually make money by making a quality product and selling it at a reasonable profit. And I'd like to see more of that.
I don't disagree. We've said it a million times in these discussions that, you know, somewhere it's got to be paid for. So either you're going to be the product, or you're going to have to pay for the product directly, or you're going to have to deal with the advertising. And I think if I have the choice, I think I'd rather pay, or at least have the option to pay for the product, pay a premium for the product, and then be absolved of all the ads and all the other options.
You know, and that's the interesting thing. That's actually, you know, we didn't start this conversation with Bitcoin, but this is something that Bitcoin actually makes possible. So again, ads make the Mac Observer possible. No ads, no Mac Observer. I'm guessing no ads, no MacVoices. Yep. No ads, no TMO's Daily Observations. I mean, it's what pays our bills. I'm not against advertising per se. I'm against this intrusive advertising and this expectation that we are products to be tracked everywhere we go and have everything that we do watched so that it can be monetized by someone else. That is the part that I do not care for. My point is that one of the problems with paying for content online is that the traditional banking and credit card system is not set up to be profitable to anyone doing microtransactions. And that's one of the things that Bitcoin can do, and it can actually do it quite well, and that's do microtransactions as little as I don't know, about a half a cent a pop, I think is what it is. 5,000, yeah, about half a cent a pop. And that transaction can actually be done profitably. And there's a company called ChangeTip. Are you familiar with them?
No.
So the short version of ChangeTip is this. I think the name of the company is CoinChange. Their first service is called ChangeTip. And with ChangeTip, I could send you Bitcoins across Twitter. I can send you Bitcoins on Reddit. I can send you Bitcoins on GitHub. So developers could actually get money, believe it or not. I can send, Reddit and YouTube and Twitter and Tumblr and a couple of more major services. And they've got it set up so that if you post a comment or if you make a tweet and you include a certain phrase, you can send Bitcoins to someone. And it's very easy for the person to collect them. And it's all pretty easy. But their goal, I spoke to the company's a couple of months ago, the company's founder, and their goal is actually to eventually get into microtransactions. So to allow, say, a site like ours for people to pay a fraction of a cent when they read an article. Or people could pay a fraction of a cent every time they view your video. Maybe since it's a video, it'd be a little more because there are bandwidth costs. But this is something that Bitcoin can actually do. Allow microtransactions that are profitable. Allow publishers to collect very small amounts of money based on consumption. But of course, that does require people to be able to be willing to pay for their consumption. And I don't know that that's the case.
Not yet. Not yet. I think sooner or later they will come around as things close in a bit more on them.
Maybe. I hope so. I hope so.
I hope so too. Bryan, we never do it nearly enough, and it's always interesting. And thank you.
Well, I've got a bookshelf behind me now, so I'll be available for more podcasts.
Okay. Well, okay. I'm not sure I understood that, but okay, that's fine. If I'd have known that, I'd have bought you a bookshelf a long time ago.
Well, I had it. I just didn't have it behind me.
Ah, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so now it's behind me. And yeah, so I'll show up for these things more often.
You look studious. Is that it?
Yeah. Well,
yeah. Thank you, Mr. Franklin.
Yes. There's a storm coming, by the way. I'm hopeful. I'll report on my experiments later.
All right. Next time. Hey, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Chuck.
Folks, Mac Notables on Mac Voices. I'm Chuck Joyner. That's Bryan Chaffin. Check the show notes. We'll have links to everything that we can think of, including a place for you to follow Bryan, a place for you to follow me on Twitter. And we'll see you here again on Mac Voices. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and the Mac Voices blog. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the MacVoices Dispatch, to stay up to date on all the latest Mac Voices news from our front page or at MacVoices.com/newsletter. Do more with your Apple tech by subscribing to the free Mac Voices magazine on Flipboard by visiting MacVoices.com/magazine. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CashFly at cashfly.com.